So where we stopped right before lunch was just before a meditative reflection. So we'll start with that. And remember that this is a review of what His Holiness taught earlier in the book. Okay? So if you can't pick up on it, remember to go read the beginning part of the book again. Okay? So, meditative reflection. First, as you did earlier, bring the target of your reasoning, the inherently established I, to mind by remembering or imagining an instance where you strongly believed in it. Okay, so they often give an example of that. When you have been unjustly criticized, okay, or when you have been profoundly offended, yeah, or discriminated against, and the kind of very strong emotion that arises at that time. Actually, the way the I appears then is not fully the inherently existent one, but it gives us a way to get there, to get a sense of this strong I. Okay, so when somebody comes in a room and looks at you and says, "You jerk," you know, "What did you do now?" And you're going, look at the way the I appears to you at that point. Okay, so that's what it's saying. Or when you really, really want something, when your mind is feeling very needy, very craving, and dissatisfied and wanting something, okay, then at that time also look, how does the I, the person, the self, appear to your mind at that time? Okay, and it has a very vivid appearance, doesn't it? Yeah, there's definitely me there, like I'm standing up for my rights, or I really need that and the world owes it to me, or whatever it is, some strong thing, okay? Or I'm so hurt what they did to me. Yeah, it could, anything like that. So bring that to mind. Then second, notice the ignorance that superimposes inherent existence and identify it. So this is more difficult because things have always appeared inherently existent to us. We've always ascended to that appearance, and so we don't even recognize it. Okay? So that it's more difficult for us, but just to watch, how does that feeling of I stand? Then 3, put particular emphasis on contemplating the fact that if such an inherent establishment exists, the I and the body-mind complex would have to be either the same or different. And here when it says the same, it means identical in all aspects. Yeah, it doesn't mean like 2 cups sitting next to each other where we say they're the same, because actually they're not the same cup. They're 2 different cups. Yeah, but sometimes we say, oh, those 2 cups are the same because they look alike. But this doesn't mean that. It means completely identical in all respects. Okay, so the I and the mind-body would have to be totally identical so that you could not separate them at all, or they have to be totally different and not related to each other. Okay, and then 4, forcefully contemplate the absurdity of assertions of the self and mind-body as either the same or different, seeing and feeling the impossibility of those assertions. And so then on the next 2 pages, we have the drawbacks that would happen if the I and either the mind-body as a collection, or the mind as one thing, the body as another, or part of the mind as one and part of the body as another. Any way you cut it, we can't say that the person is identical with any part of the body or mind, or the body and mind together as a whole. Okay? So, if they were the same, okay, so if you and your body-mind were exactly identical, they would have to be utterly and in all ways one and the same. Okay, so in that case, saying I would be pointless, because if the I and the body and mind were identical, they would be referred to by the same words, and they'd be the same thing. So in that case, saying I would be redundant. You could just say the body and mind. Okay, but that would sound very strange if you said the body mind is thinking. Okay, the body mind got invited to a party. Yeah, the body mind graduated from high school. That doesn't sound right, does it? That doesn't feel right. Yeah. So the person is not identical to the body and mind, yeah? Okay, if it were, another thing that would happen, it would be impossible to think of my body or my head or my mind, because the I would already be identical with any of those, with all of those, okay? Are you getting that? Making sense? Because if the I were identical with the body and mind, then if it's not with the whole body and mind, then it would be with part. So I would be my head, or I would be my little toe. No. Okay. Another drawback, when the body and mind no longer exists, at death time, when they no longer are conjoined, then the self would also not exist, and there would be no rebirth. Okay, so that also doesn't work. Okay, since the body and mind are plural, they're two things, then a person's self would also be plural. You should have two people. One person, that's the body, and one person that is the mind, because the body and mind body-mind is two things. Okay, that doesn't work. Or, since the I is one thing, then the body and mind also would be one thing, but they aren't one thing, they're two different things. Okay, and then also, since the body and mind are produced and disintegrate, so it would have to be asserted that the I is inherently produced and inherently disintegrates. Okay, so if you think that the body and mind arise inherently and cease inherently, then the I would have to do that too. In that case, neither the pleasurable effects of virtuous actions nor the painful effects of non-virtuous actions would bear fruit for us. Okay, because the I would have ceased when the body and mind of this life ceased. Okay, so there would be there would be no rebirth, nothing to carry the karma. Okay, or if we still could have experienced the effect of karma, it could be of anybody's karma, not just the previous, the I that is a continuity of the general I that includes the previous life and this life. Okay, so this is all gets into quite technical philosophy here. The basic points are just mentioned. You need more extensive teachings on this, okay? But this, if you studied this before, this reminds you of the points. If you haven't studied it before, it lets you know, in the future, arrange so that you can learn these things, and then the argument makes more sense. But having gone through this many years myself, I'm always discovering new things about this argument, okay? And also because when you first study it, it all makes sense intellectually, and you do the whole analysis, and you don't feel any different than you did before. Anybody have that experience? That's because, we haven't been able to identify the feeling of I and, to check if the I really exists in the way that it feels like it exists. Okay? So, many times the meditation seems a little bit intellectual. Yeah, it makes sense. So what? But when you really sometimes have a strong feeling of I, and then, do the analysis, and then you realize, oh, that I think is there actually can't exist. Then you get some feeling. But it takes time, a lot of time, yeah? But the first step is to understand the arguments, and that already takes time and some energy. So this is planting seeds, yeah, or reminding people, and so let's continue, continue to learn and practice.
Just as a reference, that section was covered in 2016 in How to See Yourself as You Really Are, which is on TiptonChildren.org website if people want to go back and review.
Okay, good. Then, if the body, mind, and the I were two different things, they would have to be completely separate in the same way that the clock and the table are two completely different things. Okay. In that case, if the I and the body and mind were two separate, unrelated things, the I would have to be findable after clearing away the body and mind. So you could take away the body and mind, and the person could be there. Or the body and mind could be in one place, and the person in another. Okay. What would you say to that? Can your body and mind be on that side of the room and you be over here? Okay. Or another thing that wouldn't work is the I would not have the characteristics of production, abiding, and disintegration, which is absurd. So if the body and mind and the I were two different things, and if you say, the body and mind don't arise and abide and disintegrate, then the I also wouldn't. Yeah, then everything would be totally permanent. That doesn't work. Or the I would absurdly have to be just a figment of the imagination, or it would have to be permanent. Okay, because it would be totally unrelated to the body-mind, so you could have a person that is just created as a figment of your imagination because it doesn't depend on a body-mind being there. Okay. And for, next point, absurdly, the I would not have any physical or mental characteristics. Yeah, so you could not say, if the body, mind, and the I were totally separate and unrelated, we couldn't say I'm thinking, because the I and the body, mind would be totally separate. We couldn't say I'm walking, because those things would be unrelated to each other. Okay. Then, next point, point 5, not finding such an I, firmly decide neither I nor any person is inherently established or inherently existent. And 6, resolve from the depths of my heart, I should seek to get beyond this round of suffering brought on myself by misconceiving what does not inherently exist as inherently existing. So this whole round of cyclic existence and misery is due to our own ignorance, because we misconceive how the I exists and how all phenomena exist. Okay? So nobody outside is keeping us in samsara. It's our own ignorance. The practice of morality involves restraining overtly poor behavior. I knew it didn't follow. Okay, so then, next thing, extending this to others. Destructive attitudes are our internal enemies, the basis for all problems. How are they produced? From lust and hatred. When he says lust, he means all forms of attachment. Doesn't necessarily mean sexual lust, although that is a very strong force of attachment. From lust and hatred, whose root is ignorance. Since these afflictive emotions cause only harm and never help, they must be overcome. In order to do so, we must deal with their causes. Okay. So all problematic emotions derive from the basic destructive emotion, an ignorant consciousness that both does not know how persons and things actually exist and actively misconstrues them. So some Buddhist schools define ignorance as just like a fog that obscures the mind so it can't see things accurately. The Prasangika Madhyamaka tenet system says it's not just the fog, it actively believes and grasps the opposite of how things actually exist. Okay, so somebody may be a thief and ignorance just doesn't recognize him as a thief, according to the lower philosophical schools. According to the Prasangika, it's not just that ignorance doesn't know the guy's a thief. Ignorance actually thinks he's a wonderful person who you can trust. So exactly the opposite. Mm-hmm. Okay, we should see destructive emotions as enemies, first identifying them and then engaging in techniques to destroy them. Okay, so this is something that can be challenging. Do we see attachment as an enemy? Attachment can make us feel good. Yeah. Everybody's attached. We feel good when we get the object of attachment. How is that an enemy? Anger. What's wrong with anger? It defends us against harm. Yeah? If we don't get angry, then everybody's going to step all over us. Okay? What's wrong with being arrogant? If I'm better than everybody else, they should recognize it. Okay? So it's hard sometimes for us, even at the beginning, to get it into our heads that these afflictive emotions actually damage us. That's hard. Then, after we accept that they damage us, the second difficult thing is noticing them in our own mind. Okay? Before I met the Dharma, I thought I was a pretty nice person. You know, I was pretty nice. And it was all these other people that lied and didn't keep good ethical conduct and behaved horribly, but I was a really good person. Then I met the Dharma, and I started listening to the teachings, and I started looking at my own mind, and oh boy, was I surprised what I found there. Yeah. Some of the characteristics that I thought were good actually were not so good. Some of the characteristics that I thought I didn't have, like I thought I didn't have a problem with anger. Well, a little problem. I got a little ticked off here and there, but not much problem with anger. Yeah. I discovered I had a big problem with anger. Okay. So this is, part of getting into practice is learning about ourselves. Mm-hmm. Okay. All problematic emotions derive from the basic destructive emotion, an ignorance consciousness that both does not know how persons and things actually are and actively misconstrues their nature. We should see destructive emotions as enemies, first identifying them and then engaging in techniques to destroy them. Yeah. So we think other people are enemies and we try to destroy them. Shantideva tells us they're going to die anyway. Why are you trying to destroy people who are transient and are going to die anyway? Whereas your afflictions are not going to vanish. They're going to keep on going. Why don't you work on them? Because those are the things that are really harming you. Okay. Driven by afflictive emotions, we engage in actions that establish counterproductive tendencies in the mind. Non-virtuous actions result in rebirth in unhappier lives, and virtuous actions result in rebirth in happier lives. Both stem from vast ignorance, however. Through directly realizing the truth, the emptiness of inherent existence, and becoming accustomed to it in meditation, you will stop accumulating karma that drives your rebirth in cyclic existence. Rebirth will come under your own power to direct it in order to help others more effectively. Okay, so here he's describing this causal process that the Buddha unpacked in a teaching called the 12 Links of Dependent Origination. Okay, and it starts out with ignorance that give rise to other afflictions. Motivated by those afflictions, we act. The actions leave the seeds of the karma on our mind stream, and then those seeds will ripen in our experiences. While we're having other experiences, in the case of the seeds of non-virtue ripening, unpleasant experiences. In the case of seeds of virtue arising, pleasant experiences. While those are arising, still we have ignorance. Ignorance will arise again. We will have more afflictions, do more actions, plant more seeds in the mind to experience more results. And so the whole thing becomes this interlocking series of chains. It becomes a merry-go-round that we have not been able to get off, and that we thought and still think is fun, except when we suffer. Then it's not fun. But otherwise, it's good, and if we just tweak it a little bit, it can be even better. Okay? And this puts us in a dilemma, yeah. It's like somebody being in prison and thinking, well, prison's pretty good. 3 hots and a cot, what more could I ask for? And I don't have to pay for any of it. Yeah? Prisons, well, okay, there's some things in prison that don't work so well, but it's not so bad. Yeah? So if somebody has that idea, they're not going to try and get out. Yeah? They'll decorate their cell a little bit, but they won't try and get out. So we're like that. Since cyclic existence is rooted in the misapprehension of inherent existence, the only way out of cyclic existence is recognizing this fallacy for what it is. Though there are many factors producing cyclic existence, only at its root, ignorance, can it be severed, for this is the source of all the other causes. Through the meditative reflections in this book, you have learned how to cultivate antidotes to those causes in order to put an end to suffering and the cause of suffering, or dukkha, unsatisfactory experiences, because we don't always think that we're suffering. Okay, dukkha can be translated in many ways. When you internalize this process, you generate an intention to achieve liberation with more than just words, so it becomes your heartfelt goal. Through practice, your aims become transformed. You generate a heartfelt intention to leave the round of pain, at which point you become a spiritual practitioner of increased capacity. As the Tibetan scholar yogi Tsongkhapa tells us in his 3 principal aspects of the path to awakening, at this point you focus day and night on attaining liberation. You are intent on relief. From the depths of your mind, you have decided that if you do not attain liberation from the entire process of cyclic existence, the value of your human lifetime will not have been fulfilled. So that's how strong the aspiration for liberation becomes. And it needs to be that strong, because otherwise samsara's pleasures look tantalizingly wonderful to our obscured, ignorant mind, and we get sucked back in. Being a human is the best possible basis for achieving liberation from cyclic existence, for using the practices of morality, concentrated meditation, and wisdom. The practice of morality involves restraining overtly poor behaviors of body, speech, and mind. More subtle ill behaviors are suppressed through training in the concentrated meditation of calm abiding or serenity. The final abandonment of ill deeds is achieved through training in the wisdom of insight into the emptiness of inherent existence. Initially, you train in morality or ethical conduct, because when you function under the influence of gross afflictive emotions, your physical and verbal behavior become harsh, harming yourself and others. Morality or ethical conduct involves controlling these gross activities so that they do not manifest. So yesterday, when we talked about stop being a jerk or getting your act together, this is the first level of it, okay? However, the practice of ethical conduct cannot eradicate afflictive emotions. They only help us not act out the very gross ones. And only when afflictive emotions are completely extinguished will you attain liberation. This procedure you should undertake once you understand your plight in cyclic existence. Okay, so the following, what he's going to describe, depends on first understanding what cyclic existence is and seeing that this is a description of our life. Okay, so it really involves putting away all of our identity, all of our other notions about what life is, and just looking at this description and seeing if it explains our situation. Okay? Because as long as we hold on to these other notions, I am this, I am that, I am secure because of this, nothing bad will happen to me because of that. As long as we have all these things, I will be happy when I get this or that. As long as we have that, we can't really see our situation very clearly. Okay? So we have to put all that usual conceptual chatter away and just look clearly at, okay, here's what the Buddha said. Is this true or not? Let's think about it logically. Let's apply it to my life and see if it's true. Okay, so if you decide that it's true, here's the procedure to undertake. First, train in recognizing the extent of suffering in this life. Yeah, so think of the disadvantages of being in cyclic existence as they pertain to this life. Yeah, not getting what you want, getting what you don't want, having what you want, and then it gets stolen or destroyed and you don't have it anymore. Unpredictability, yeah, getting born, getting old, getting sick, dying. Think about these kinds of things, okay? Then 2, then generate distaste for all forms of the round of suffering from one life to another, called cyclic existence. Okay, so here it's not just thinking about this life, but even other lifetimes. Even if you have the best lives in samsara, you still don't have a stable situation. You still don't have lasting happiness or security. So, don't get stuck in those higher states, because they're not going to bring about, they're not going to fulfill your spiritual aspirations. Okay, and instead train in morality, ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom. Okay, and 3, eventually, through fully accomplishing these practices, you can attain a state of liberation from cyclic existence in which dukkha has been completely extinguished. So all unsatisfactory situations are extinguished. Okay. So in this way, you can achieve liberation. But even then, your own aims will not have been brought to complete fulfillment. Okay, you're free, but still your potential isn't fulfilled. You still have not overcome the primary obstacle to a full ability to help others. Okay, so the primary obstacle is the predispositions or the latencies left on the mind by ignorance of the true nature of persons and things. Even though ignorance itself has been overcome, these predispositions lie latent in the mind, keeping it from knowing all that can be known. So the analogy that's usually given here is cooking onions. Okay, when you take the onions out of the pot, okay, you got rid of the really stinky stuff. But the pot still smells like onions until you wash it. So we may have gotten ignorance and all the afflictions out of our mind, but their predispositions, their latencies are still in the mind, and that pollutes the mind. That's like the remaining smell of onions. While you are in this state, even if you try to help others, no more than a little bit of benefit can be accomplished, because our own mind is still obscured. Although it is unquestionably beneficial to achieve liberation from cyclic existence, in terms of quality of mind, your outlook is still involved primarily with your own welfare. So, you've overcome some very strong things of self-grasping, but you're a little bit attached to your own liberation. Okay? So your outlook is still involved primarily with your own welfare. In terms of your own progress, the process of overcoming obstructions and realizing high states is not yet complete. You are still dwelling in a form of solitary peace. So this is a type of nirvana that is your own personal nirvana. Yeah. So it's great Nobody's knocking it. It's great. But His Holiness is saying it's not the ultimate thing we can do. It is important not to become inclined towards solitary peace, because by aiming merely at liberation for your own sake, you lengthen the process of attaining altruistic awakening directed to others' good. And that's our ultimate goal. So if you attain your own liberation first, there's a tendency to stay in that for a while instead of continuing to practice to purify your mind completely. And His Holiness is saying that makes the path to full awakening longer, because you kind of stopped at a good resting place. Whereas if from the very beginning you're setting your notion, your aim on full awakening, then the momentum builds and you can actually accomplish that quicker. And that's the ultimate goal. By mainly taking care of yourself, you foster a self-centered attitude. And this attitude is difficult to overcome later when you train in great love and great compassion. Yeah? Consequently, it is crucial from the very beginning not to invest your strength of mind in your own benefit. Okay? So that refers not to being self-centered with regards to how we're acting in this life and how people normally talk about being self-centered or selfish, but it also implies on a spiritual level not thinking or clinging to only our own liberation, okay? Only our own freedom from samsara. By understanding emptiness, you realize that it is possible to break free from your own entrapment in cyclic existence, which makes firm your resolve to leave cyclic existence. When you understand that the suffering of others is also induced by ignorance, you realize that it is possible for them to free themselves from all suffering, and that strengthens your decision to help them. Okay? So you realize that just as you can be free and you can free yourself, others can be free and they can free themselves. Okay? We cannot liberate them. The Buddhas cannot liberate them. The Buddhas would have done so if the Buddha could have liberated us and them already. What the Buddha does is teach us how to liberate ourselves. So when we aim for full awakening, we're trying to gain the wisdom and compassion and power and skillful means so that we can instruct others on the path, and so that we can motivate them and guide them on the path and encourage them. But everybody has to do their own work. Okay, so there's a saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So Buddhas lead us to water. We have to drink the water. Okay. In this way, insight makes love and compassion realistic expressions of deep knowledge. So you have the knowledge of reality, you have the knowledge that you and others can be liberated, and that affects what love and compassion mean to you. When you wish sentient beings to have happiness and its causes at that point, it isn't, may they win the lottery, may they have a good marriage, may they, have as much chocolate as they want, may they live in a nice country. No, how you want your love and compassion, how it manifests, is a wish for them to have the bliss of full awakening, to be completely free of their own cyclic existence, to have stable and lasting joy in their minds, not just to have some kind of superficial pleasure. Okay, so love and compassion becomes very different than ordinary love and compassion at that point, because your mind is thinking in a whole different scope. Your mind isn't thinking just about this life. Your mind's thinking about future lives. It's thinking about all of samsara. It's thinking about the potential in people's minds that they don't even know they have. As the Buddha said, the Buddha's compassion for sentient beings is generated through contemplating, whereas all phenomena are empty, sentient beings cling to views of inherent existence. Okay? So you're able to look at sentient beings and see, reality is this way. Things lack inherent existence. Sentient beings cling to the exact opposite. No wonder they're confused. No wonder they experience pain. Yeah. And so again, you're looking at the causes of suffering in a much deeper way. You're not saying the cause of suffering is the coronavirus, or the cause of suffering is our government who isn't being proactive in eliminating the virus. Those things, yes, can be contributing factors, but why are we in this situation to start with a body that can fall ill due to the coronavirus? Why do we even have this kind of body to start with? Okay, we're asking a different kind of question when we do spiritual practice. Okay, we're not just taking our present situation for granted. We're saying, what are the sources of it? How did this come about? Yeah, and then figuring out that there are other states of existence, other ways of being, and that if we purify our mind of our misconceptions and our grasping, that we can have a totally different experience than we have now. Okay, so this is really mental expansion. Okay. Understanding that beings are empty of inherent existence, you develop even more profound love and compassion by holistically seeing how they bring suffering on themselves through ignorance of the nature of people and other phenomena. Realizing the emptiness of inherent existence opens the way to enhanced love and compassion. Understanding the ultimate nature of persons and things calls to mind limitless sentient beings who are similar to you in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, who over the course of countless lifetimes have been your closest friends, sustaining you with kindness. From this sense of intimacy, combined with knowledge of why they suffer cyclic rounds of pain through rebirth, you call forth powerful concern for their well-being. So do you see how this concern for their well-being is definitely different than ordinary compassion? It isn't, oh, you poor thing. It isn't, you got cut, I'm going to, put a Band-Aid on your cut. Yeah. It's like, how can we get you out of this situation where you get cut in the first place? Yeah. What are the real deeper causes of the experience of pain and discontent and so on? Okay, so now another meditative reflection. So these meditative reflections are our homework. Okay? Bring a friend to mind, and while remembering the process of self-ruinous cyclic existence, consider the following. Okay? So think of somebody that you care about, a friend or like that. And think, like me, this person is lost in an ocean of misapprehension of I as inherently existent, fed by a huge river of ignorance, mistaking mind and body to be inherently existent, and agitated by winds of counterproductive thoughts and actions. So that's really what this person's life is about. I mean, think of some public figure that you really don't like. And you can go on and on. This person is this and they're that, and I don't like them because of this, and they're corrupt because of that. But actually, what's their situation? They're lost in an ocean of misapprehension of I as inherently existent, fed by a huge river of ignorance, mistaking mind and body to be inherently existent, and agitated by winds of counterproductive thoughts and actions. And they don't even realize they're in that situation. So drop the rest of it. Look at just this is the reality of that person's life. Okay. Then 2, like someone mistaking a reflection of the moon in water for the moon itself. This person mistakes the appearance of I and other phenomena to mean that they exist in their own right. Okay, so they're fully confident in their way of viewing the world, and they're fully confident that their unethical actions are okay. Yeah, they're fully confident that they're above the law, or they can say whatever they want and nothing bad is going to happen. Okay? Not at all realizing the situation they're in. And not at all realizing that they're going to die and experience the results of their own actions right now. Yeah. So at that point, you may be tempted to say, oh, they're going to die and go to the hell realms. Finally, they're going to get a taste of their own medicine. They're going to get retribution. Don't think like that. What use is it wishing any sentient being harm? What good does their experiencing harm do for you? Yeah, it doesn't do any good. Do you think they're going to learn their lesson from experiencing harm? I don't think so. I don't think while somebody's in a unfortunate rebirth, they're going to go, oh yeah, I remember being a human being and I wasn't such a nice guy and now I got this rebirth. They're not going to be thinking that. They're going to be fully immersed in the misery of their next rebirth. Okay, so it's no use wishing anybody else harm. And in any case, what kind of person does that make you if you gloat over other people's suffering? Yeah? Oh, I'm so glad he got what was coming to him. What kind of person does that make you? 1. Okay, point 2. Yeah. Yes, I did point 2 too. Okay, point 3. I get so into saying something, I forget where I was. By accepting this false appearance, this person is powerlessly drawn into lust and hatred, accumulating karma, and being born over and over again in a round of pain. That's their situation. They may live in a fancy house. Yeah, they may have so much riches now, but their situation doesn't go beyond this, of being trapped in this cycle of rebirth. 4, through this process, this person unnecessarily brings pain upon him or herself as well as others. Unnecessarily, because if they had wisdom, this wouldn't happen. Okay, so you do that meditation really thinking about the other person's situation. Now remember, before you do it for them, you've done it for yourself and seen your own situation. Then you do it for them. Then, again, you generate the 3 levels of love and compassion and make the commitment. So I'll read through that again, So don't just go hurriedly. Okay, the first part of the meditation was kind of new. I'll do that. And then the other I got down already. No, you go through each step and really go into it. Okay, so the 3 levels of love. This person wants happiness but is bereft. Think of your new idea of what happiness is. That happiness doesn't mean lying on the beach over Memorial Day. Okay, that there's better states of happiness than this. Okay, how nice it would be if she or he could be imbued with happiness and all the causes of happiness. This person wants happiness but is bereft. Okay, again, think of, they're not only bereft of happiness this life, but whatever happiness they have is going to last. You go out and play a round of golf on Memorial Day. Oh, isn't that nice? I'm out of the house breathing fresh air. Is that going to bring you lasting happiness? Okay. So may he or she be imbued with happiness and all the causes of happiness. 3, this person wants happiness but is bereft. I will do whatever I can to help her or him be imbued with happiness and all the causes of happiness. In this life, there may be little we can do for some people. With other people, there may be a lot because we have a closer karmic connection with them. So, sometimes we feel, I can't really benefit people very much. But when you think about it, in your family, in your workplace, those people. His Holiness Dalai Lama doesn't have personal access to those people. You do. So there's ways you can influence them, ways in which slowly you can introduce them to the Dharma without using any Buddhist words or any fancy anything, just to help them. Okay? And then you see people like His Holiness, can influence a huge number of people. And I just think of, there's one time, it must have been before 2016, when His Holiness addressed the Congress. I thought, wow, Mitch heard His Holiness. Now that put some good imprint on his mind. Hopefully it will ripen in future lives. Yeah? So my dream is to address Congress. I don't think that's going to happen this lifetime anyway. Okay. Now cultivate the 3 levels of compassion. Okay, 1, this person wants happiness and does not want suffering, yet is stricken with terrible pain. If this person could only be free of suffering and the causes of suffering, how wonderful it would be. 2, this person wants happiness and does not want suffering, yet is stricken with terrible pain. May this person be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. More energy into it. 3, this person wants happiness and does not want suffering, yet is stricken with terrible pain. I will help this person be free from suffering and all the causes of suffering. So you really want to help, okay? But then you look at your own situation and you go, I can't even get myself out of samsara. How am I going to get anybody else out? Realistically. Yeah. I'm completely subject to all this stuff too. So if, how can I really help anybody get out? I have to do something about my own situation and improve the quality of my own mind so I can be of greater benefit. So now comes the total commitment. Think cyclic existence is a process driven by ignorance. Therefore, it is realistic for me to work to achieve awakening and to help others do the same. And even if I have to do it alone, I will free all sentient beings from suffering and the causes of suffering, and set all sentient beings in happiness and its causes. Which, so you may say, well, that, you can't really do that. Okay, but this setting that intention is going to make you hang around until samsara ends. Okay, instead of just saying, well, I liberated some sentient beings. That's good enough. I can't liberate all of them. There's more Buddhas coming. All the beings I liberated, they can now take over. Yeah, I'm going into retirement. Okay, you think Chenrezi's going to do that? Chenrezi's going to say, look, you guys, my head split into 11 pieces out of compassion for you. And I have a headache now. And, I've been helping you. It's your turn to work for sentient beings. Okay. But don't think I'm going to a nursing home because they're not so safe with the coronavirus, I'm going to go to the Pure Land. But good luck, everybody. You think Chenrezi's going to say that? No. Yeah. They say that the Buddhas have more compassion for us than we have for ourselves. One by one, bring to mind individual sentient beings, first friends, then neutral persons, and then enemies, starting with the least offensive, and repeat these reflections with them. It will take months and years, but the benefit of this practice will be extraordinary. And then the impact of great love and great compassion. Be willing to familiarize yourself with this attitude, taking on yourself the burden of protecting all sentient beings from all problems. Do it repeatedly and with regular analysis. Your empathy will be so great that it will suffuse, your entire being. Without any desire for reward or acclaim, your aim will be solely the development of others, never disheartened or discouraged in your task. So that's where what we want to grow into being. Okay, then before we do questions, there's an appendix at the end with all the meditations repeated. But there's a tradition in Tibetan Buddhism that when you start a text, when you finish a text, you go back to the beginning and start over again and read a few paragraphs, and then you leave it undone. And that means you have to meet again to finish it. Okay, so we'll read a few paragraphs here. So it's called My Perspective. When we rise in the morning and listen to the news or read the newspaper, we are confronted with the same sad stories, violence, wars, and disasters. It is clear that even in modern times, precious life is not safe. I cannot recall a single daily news program without a report of crime somewhere. There is so much bad news nowadays, such an awareness of fear and tension, that any sensitive and compassionate being must question the quote, progress we have made in our modern world. Ironically, the most serious problems emanate from industrially advanced societies where unprecedented literacy not only seems to have fostered restlessness and discontent, or only seems to have fostered restlessness and discontent. There is no doubt about our collective progress in many years, especially science and technology. But somehow our advances in knowledge are not sufficient. Basic human problems remain. We have not succeeded in bringing about peace or in reducing overall suffering. Okay. So, His Holiness is leaving us with that challenge. Okay, now we have a little bit of time for questions, comments. So there was one that was written. How is helping the economy a type of covetousness, one of the 10 non-virtues? Helping the economy is not covetousness. Nothing wrong with helping the economy. What I was referring to is being a consumer that covets more things than we really need. Yeah, being a consumer that uses more than our fair share of the world's resources. Being a consumer that profits from pollution of the earth and makes the situation for future generations more dire. So that's the non-virtue, the result of covetousness.
And does the mind transmigrate with the I if it is also independent of the body? So does the mind transmigrate with the I?
The I, the question makes it sound like the I and the mind are two different things. The I is designated independence on the mind. So the mind transmigrates to another life, okay? We get a new set of mental aggregates according to the realm that we're born into. But the I is designated on that mind. Okay?
In this meditative reflection on looking at the one or many situation, so you bring the first point is to bring to mind something that makes this appearance of I appear. And the second one is notice the ignorance that superimposes inherent existence and identify it. So my question has always been, how do you actually identify the ignorance itself? Seems extremely subtle. Like you can identify that appearance and you can see how that appears. But that sounds different than what it says here, which is notice the ignorance that's doing it. So
the ignorance that is grasping at the appearance. You're splitting hairs. When you notice the inherently existent I, what is that mind that's grasping? That's the ignorance. So it's not like, okay, here's the appearance of true existence, there's the ignorance, and there's you meditating over here. And they're three different things, okay? It's not like that. You're noticing that, the appearance is what the ignorance is grasping at, and that's happening in your very own mind, okay? So it's not like you're going to have, oh, there's a picture of ignorance. It's pink and purple. And no, it's that mental state to which that appearance is appearing and being grasped and held as true. How do you recognize attachment?
Well, that's exactly the difference. I have a sense, I have a physical sense, I can see it, I can see how it works in my mind. But ignorance, and I certainly have it with anger or with jealousy or with all the other afflictions.
Yeah.
But to actually have this sense of ignorance, other than being able to see what I know, being able to have some glimpse of what is appearing.
That's it.
That's it. That's enough.
That's enough. Okay. Yeah. You may not have the physical things happening like you do with attachment or anger, but notice how the mind is apprehending things.
Venerable Sundru online is asking, could Venerable Children explain what she means that this appearance of the I that we bring up at the beginning of the meditation of refuting the self is not the actual inherently existent I?
Okay. The inherently existent I is extremely subtle. Yeah? And usually what happens is first there's the ignorance of inherent existence. That gives way to the ignorance grasping a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. That is what gives rise to our very gross manifest afflictions. Okay? So when in normal life, you feel offended or somebody said something you didn't like and you're angry, yeah, that's a much grosser sense of much grosser grasping at I than the extremely subtle one of grasping inherent existence. Okay? So I can't say that I really know what the one of grasping inherent existence is, but I do notice that my sense of I, when I'm upset about something, there's one sense of I there that's much more noticeable. But there's another sense of I when I'm just very peaceful, and then I hear somebody say, children. There's something, yeah? So I don't know. I'm trying to discover this and understand it too. But I do know that that sense of I is much subtler than the very gross one of, when somebody accuses me of something I didn't do. Okay, so we have to start at least identifying the gross ones and then work our way into the subtle ones. Although if we can identify the subtle ones right off the bat, that's good. But if our mind is fairly gross, then do the best you can, start off with what you can. By the way, in this meditation, we're not looking for the inherently existent I. We are examining how the I exists, and if it existed inherently, these are the difficulties that would happen.
So the I, for me, it really goes into that control or somebody in charge. Is that the self-sufficient substantial that says, okay, here's a mind, a body, and I'm sort of running the program?
Yeah. That's
Okay,
the self-sufficient substantial existent one.
That one, I can sometimes experience that as an other, although it's still me running this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's somebody in charge here. There's some boss in charge of the body and mind who's directing it. Yeah. And that the feeling is so strong. There's really me who's in charge of the body and mind until you start examining how that I exists. And then who in the world is in charge of this body and mind? You can't find anyone that is.
What comes to mind is the subject-object duality that Jay Garfield spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
And, we just perceive everything in terms of a self and everything else is other. So maybe that's related to this inherently existent sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because without grasping at a truly existent self, we're not going to make a truly existent other.
So I've been thinking about how it was said that we need both compassion, recognizing other people's suffering, as well as a feeling of affection for them.
Say that again?
We need to be able to develop compassion. We need to see others suffering, but also to have a feeling of affection for them, recognizing their kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that aspect of recognizing their kindness hasn't been addressed so much in these progressions of these meditations.
Yeah, I think it was earlier in the book, if I remember correctly.
But I was wondering whether that's a completely separate meditation or whether you can kind of weave it in throughout these.
No, it's good to do as a separate meditation, okay? Because that's a meditation more on the bodhicitta side of the path, to reflect on the kindness of others and develop that feeling of heartwarming love that then gives rise to actual love and compassion. Yeah, so treat it as a separate meditation. In doing these meditations here, if you don't have that sense when you start these ones here, then go back and review so you develop that sense of their kindness and their suffering, and then go into generating love and compassion for them.
So watching His Holiness last week, I've been thinking like what appeared to me, he was so normal. Like it was like a teaching last year. He was like that. There was no difference. The pandemic, not pandemic. I mean, it's like, is this what the result of having meditated on emptiness and seeing the three kinds of compassion and being able to see the situation in this? And it's just so stable and so reassuring.
Right.
It's so solid.
Yeah. Yeah. His Holiness wasn't panicked about the coronavirus. And yeah. Yeah. The compassion was, I mean, this is what happens through the force of familiarity. Yeah. By doing the practices again and again, then by the force of familiarity, they become who we are. Yeah. And it naturally flows, like you just commented.
Someone asks, so anger can be there without me grasping and identifying me with it? So it disappears by itself?
No.
Something like that?
No. The anger, the ignorance is the root of the anger. If you don't have ignorance, you're not going to have anger. Okay? And to have anger, you have to have ignorance. So we work on the, because realizing emptiness is more difficult, first we work on the antidotes that are specifically for anger. We subdue it. And then as we're doing that, we start to meditate on emptiness. And it's when we cut the grasping at inherent existence, then the anger doesn't have anything to stand on. So they call it, the anger is like the root of the tree. The ignorance is like the root of the tree, and the anger is like a branch. Yeah, you can cut off the branch, but the root's there. If you want to cut off the branch once and for all, so it's not going to be there, uproot the tree. Okay.
Someone asks, can you please explain the Buddhist definition of ego versus the Western psychology definition of ego?
I don't know that there's a Buddhist definition of ego. Lots of people use the word ego when they're teaching, but I don't think there's one Buddhist definition of it. Yeah, there's a psychological definition of it. Although I don't know, Venerable Jigme, are there different definitions of ego according to different forms of psychology?
Maybe subtle differences, yeah, in how they explain.
Okay, wait. No, she said maybe some differences in how they explain, but there's no Buddhist word ego. So some people use ego to mean grasping, some people use ego to mean self-centeredness. The word is thrown around in a lot of different ways.
How is the mind connected to or identified with a specific body?
How is the mind connected?
Or identified with a specific body?
At the time of death, when the karma ripens, it ripens in a vision so that the mind is attracted to a certain kind of body. And by the force of that attraction, the mind goes and gets reborn in that body.